I want to talk about how you can really use your sketchbook to get further faster as you're working through painting. There are three things that are super important that you can implement or use your sketchbook that'll make it so much easier on those days you're painting. And you can carry this over into your studio practice in general. The first is to use it to plan your compositions. One of the ways to maximize your compositions to really create compelling paintings is not just to rely on the computer, but really to use your sketchbook in order to get there. Second thing that you want to think about using your sketchbook for is to use it to simplify the shapes. One of the biggest challenges people have in painting is that they try to get too many little details in there. They get too caught up in the minutia. And one of the best ways to back out of that and keep from getting stuck there is to use your sketches ahead of time to simplify those shapes down to the basics so that you're not trapped into detail land. The third thing is to use your sketchbook to plan out the values ahead of time, to figure out what the value relationships are in your subject, in your sketch, rather than in your painting. All of those things, when you practice them together, mean that when you sit down to paint, you've got 99.99% of the decision-making work done ahead of time, and then you can dive straight in and paint in flow. I'm going to share some examples of each of those things so that you get a better idea of what I'm talking about here. When we're looking at this sketch, I was out working plein air. I was on the edge of the river and trying to capture the overall shape relationships of what I was looking at. The clouds were moving really quickly, and I wanted to grab those shapes and those forms before they passed. It is a very light, quick, overall compositional sketch that I then played around with and refined as I moved into creating the painting. This is like a big working out the composition part of it. And deciding what you're going to crop is another thing that you might want to do. For example, and I want to start with this first one here. I was working out the composition for this one. So I sketched it off, that basic outlines of the shapes first. So I'm mapping out here, when I sketch that out, I'm looking for the overall shape of the value areas, not the things, but the values. And then I did a quick thumbnail, and you can see where I adjusted the composition and made it more of a vertical here rather than a horizontal in that one. In this one, again, I was working plein air. So I worked out the overall value relationships first, and I wasn't worrying too much about the compositional structure itself because I needed to be able to crop and adjust. So I sketched out where everything was, the basic overall value patterns. And then in the thumbnail, I moved things around a little bit. I moved and tightened in my focus so that I'm concentrating and creating a strong focal point so that it's not as all over the picture plane as it is in the top sketch here. So the one that I ended up painting was the one at the bottom. The first one at the top, it was really a quick sketch just to get the feel of what I was looking at. And then I adjusted the composition. So that's what I mean by using the sketch to work out the composition. Then when we're looking at that bottom one, that's an example of both working out the shape relationships and the values. Those two things are so closely related. Shape and value, the shapes are created by the values. So you simplify things down to their overall general value relationship, looking for the value pattern. And if you can work those out ahead, it means that it can be so much faster when you're blocking in your painting. So you can see here that there are basically there are about 8 shapes here. I've included some sky holes in the trees. but they're roughly about 8. I generally tell my students to go for 3 to 5 values and 5 to 7 shapes and keep it super, super simple. So first is working out the composition, then second is looking for simplifying the shapes and identifying the values that you see. Those are the 3 main reasons, the 3 main things that you want to use your sketchbook for. Those are some things you can do ahead of time that make the actual painting part itself worry-free and stress-free. Because the fewer decisions you have to make while you're painting, the better off you're going to be. We only get a few decisions that we can make in one day. And if we use them all up on stuff that is not as important, or if we try to drag it out into the painting process, it will get in our way. Take care, everybody, and happy painting. Let's paint on. Bye-bye for now.